And you're listening to Westford on the Pot. Oh, sorry, I had a little pain. Just for a minute. Okay. We are in chapter 7 from our book reading, Washington in the Lap of Rome by Justin D. Fulton. It was written in 1888. Excuse me. All right, let's see. Let me take this thing off my chest because it's more of a distraction than anything right now, so I don't want it on me. I am doing well, guys. I just came home Thursday from the bilateral mastectomy. God has been very good to me. The pain has been minimal. Praise God. He's good. And it's healing up pretty well. It's healing up pretty well. Today is Saturday, so it's a beautiful day. It's Memorial Weekend. Okay. Washington in the Lap of Rome, chapter 7. The hospital under Romanist control. In one way or another, Rome pushes her way to seats of power and influence. Is it because Protestants are too modest or too indifferent to resist? The Romanist priest is in the workhouse caring for paupers because Protestant ministers neglect to do it well. So that's not a new thing. This is written in 1888. I tell you what. And that is the truth. The Catholic Church has got us all kinds of beat when it comes to taking care of people and stuff. And they're not even genuinely born again. That's crazy. Okay, the Romanist priest is in the workhouse caring for paupers because Protestant ministers neglect to do it. He gets a chaplaincy in the prison and jail for the same reason. It has come to be believed that Roman Catholics are adapted to care for our eleemosynary institutions, such as hospitals, houses of refuge, orphan asylums, and institutions of kindred character, as are not Protestants. Let us not find fault with Romanists for doing what Protestants neglect to do. Nothing could be more unfair or unwise. Let us not give over to the Romanists work that we ought to do ourselves. It is surprising fact that every hospital in Washington is in the hands of Roman Catholics, with one exception, and that has the treasurer and 3 members of the board, Roman Catholics. That Sisters of Charity are the nurses, and the American citizens are compelled to see these representatives of faith utterly distasteful to the majority enthroned in power. As a rule, American citizens do not like the headgear of the sisters. Why can't they take off those white-winged sunbonnets in the ward? Asked one poor fellow, reared in a Protestant home and yet sick in a hospital. Sunbonnets, sneered another of the irreverent critics. They're a cross between a white sunbonnet and a broken-down umbrella, and there's no name that describes them. This language describes the feeling of very many in the hospitals in Washington. They do not like the headgear or the manners of the so-called Sisters of Mercy. It is theory that there are no nobler and no more heroic women than those found in the Catholic sisterhoods. The fact explodes the theory. They are like other women. Some are good and some are bad, some kind and some cruel. Reverend J.W. Parker, D.D., pastor at one time of the East Street Baptist Church in Washington, D.C., related that his own brother was in a Washington hospital and that nuns were the nurses. He desired a drink of water in the night and asked for it and overheard them say, "He is a heretic. Let him choke." A friend in such a hospital with nuns as nurses found herself in a constant worry because she would keep her New Testament by her side and would have her pastor visit her. The nuns did every disagreeable thing possible until the minister told them that if such conduct did not cease, it would be reported at headquarters and punishment would be demanded. Another woman who had been at one time a Roman Catholic, who had been converted to Christianity, found herself in the hospital ministered unto by the Sisters of Mercy. They brought to her bedside a priest. She declined to see him. He persisted in coming. Her Protestant friends and the minister were told that she had gone back to the Church of Rome and that she did not wish them more. They believed the story and stayed away for the time. They insisted on administering extreme unction, daubed her with oil, and drenched her with holy water, leaving her to die. The minister forced his way by the guards and got into the room. Why have you left me to the pitiless persecutions of these enemies of Christ? They told me that you wished it, that you had gone back to the idols of Rome and turned your back on Christ. It is a lie, a popish lie. I have asked for you daily. I turned with loathing from their mummeries, but was compelled by weakness to endure this oil and holy water. Take me out of here. The woman was removed to a home of love where she was cared for. Why is such cruelty tolerated? Hold on, I think I got 2 pages here. Nope, okay. Cla- Clarence was the brother of the architect who supervised the construction of a large addition to the most important public building in Washington. Clarence had won the heart of a daughter of a member of the Lincoln's cabinet. Her sister was married to an eminent lawyer who was afterward a member of Garfield's cabinet. The lady insisted upon a reformation of life and his taking up and following some honest occupation. He accepted a position under his brother, but soon fell into his former ways. Worn out with a debauch which lasted several weeks, he entered the Providence Hospital, which deserves to be styled the drunkard's retreat. Then he professed the Roman Catholic religion without a reformation of life and without giving up his cups even for a brief period, and in that faith lived and died a drunkard and was buried in consecrated ground. Another and a sadder scene, a lady, beautiful in face and form, was upon her deathbed. The priest came to administer extreme unction. He had, of course, the room to himself, and while with the lady alone, attempted an assault. She shrieked for help. The daughter, despite the rules of the church, burst into the room. Turn, turn the wretch out, exclaimed the mother, and promise me that come what will, you will never allow a priest to approach you, nor have more to do with the Church of Rome. The promise was made. Years passed. The daughter grew sick. Her friends were Roman Catholics. Her money was gone. She was compelled to be ministered unto by a Roman Catholic nurse, and because she would not suffer a priest to come and administer extreme unction and die in the faith of Rome, they drew the bed from beneath her dying form and left her upon the bare slats to lie, until a Protestant friend, now living in Washington, brought pillows and placed beneath her and took her to her own house where she died. Then they would not let her rest, but dug up her body, carried it to concentrated ground, and boasted that she died in the Church of Rome. Because such conduct is possible, Roman Catholic surgeons opposed the employment of Protestant nurses and declared they will not have them in the service, and that only the sisters of the Catholic Church shall receive appointments. I sought, said Mrs. M.A. Livermore, for the cause of this decision. Your Protestant nurses are always finding some mare's nest or other, said one of the surgeons, that they can't let alone. They all write for the papers, and the story finds its way into print, and directly we are in hot water. Now the sisters never see anything they ought not to see, nor hear anything they never write for the papers, and the result is we get along very comfortably with them. It was futile to combat their prejudice or to attempt to show them that they lack the power to enforce their decisions. Does not this explain why the Sisters of Mercy are preferred in Washington? Here is a letter from a distinguished woman connected with a church of influence and with societies which would gladly do the needed work. She writes, quote, "There is not a hospital in Washington where a Christian can go and feel that he or she is not confronted by Roman Catholics. Columbia Hospital for Women, supported by Congress, has a drunken, brutal Roman Catholic surgeon in charge. Priests are banqueted and given full sway in the house. All the illegitimate children are Christian by them, and the influence of Rome pervades every department. The hospital erected in memory of the sainted Garfield is infested by them because of the idea so prevalent that Romanists are the only people who can do charity work. Alas for humanity when such ideas prevail." Unquote. Miss Mary A. Livermore, in her Story of the War, speaks of the persistent effort to fill hospitals with Sisters of Mercy and exclude good, trained, excellent Protestant nurses. They would not be daunted or turned back. Our husbands, sons, and brothers need us and want us. If the surgeons are determined to employ Roman Catholic nurses to the exclusion of Protestant, we shall contend for our rights and appeal to the Secretary of War. They carried the day and filled the land with their forces. Had the Protestant ladies of Washington manifested equal courage and persistency, they could have held control. The United States hospitals got clear of the headgear of the nuns and filled their places with trained Protestant nurses. On the 10th of June, 1861, Secretary Cameron vested Dorothy Dix with sole power to appoint women nurses in the hospital. Secretary Stanton, succeeding him, ratified their appointment. Miss Dix desired women over 30 years of age, plain almost to repulsion in dress, and devoid of personal attraction. Many of the women whom she rejected because they were too young and too beautiful entered the service under other auspices and became immensely useful. It is not necessary to have a nun's headgear nor a homely face to make a woman a good nurse. There was a time when the hospitals in Washington were marvels of order and comfort and neatness. Among the nurses were some of the very noblest women of the East, women of culture, of family, and of rare nobleness of character, acted as nurses. Too little praise has been bestowed upon the heroic Protestant nurses. Among the women famed in Washington was Miss Amy M. Bradley, an alert, executive woman from Maine. She had been a successful teacher before the war and had already achieved an invaluable reputation in the hospital service of the Commission. For our men speedily fell victims to the malaria of the miasmatic swamps of the Chickahominy during the terrible Peninsular Campaign in the spring and summer of 1862. The hospital transports of the Commission did heroic service in those dark days in removing the poor fellows north where they could have a chance to live or at least to die among their kindred. Amy Bradley had made herself a power in these transports by her skill in nursing, in preparing food for the sick and wounded, in dressing wounds, and in making herself generally useful to the wretched men temporarily placed during her care. She had charge of the soldiers' home in Washington. Mrs. Livermore found it the abode of neatness and cheerfulness. The pleasant reading room was filled with quiet readers, every man of whom seemed comfortable. As we spake to them, each one had his grateful story to tell of Mrs. Bradley's care and faithfulness. Quote, Miss Bradley obtained over $100 worth of back pay for me, which I could not get myself, said one, and I have forwarded to my family in need of it. Unquote. $100, interjected another. She has obtained over $100,000 worth of money back from the government for soldiers since she came to the home. She nursed over 900 of us in the hospital, chimed in another, and only 13 died. Bring on your doctor who can do better. You ought to see the letters she writes every week for the men in the home, added an assistant. The letters she writes haven't any blue streaks in them, but are solid chunks of sunshine, erect, decisive, quick of comprehension, and prompt in action, winning everyone by her kindly face. Is it not strange that she was not given a place in one of the hospitals of Washington, and that they should all be surrendered to the representatives of the Church of Rome? Oh, permit Mrs. Livermore to describe another Protestant nurse. Quote, among the hundreds of women who devoted a part or the whole of the years of the war to the care of the sick and wounded of the army, Mother Bickerdike stands preeminent. She was unique in method, extraordinary in executive ability, enthusiastic in devotion, and indomitable in will. After her plan was formed and her purposes matured, she carried them through triumphantly in the teeth of the most formidable opposition. She gave herself to the rank and file of the army, the private soldiers for whom she had unbounded tenderness and developed almost limitless resources of help and comfort. To them she was strength and sweetness, and for them she exercised sound practical sense, a ready wit, and a rare intelligence that made her a power in the hospital or in the field. There was no peril she would not dare for a sick and wounded man, no official red tape of formality for which she cared more than a common tow string, if it interfered with her work of relief. To their honor be it said, the boys reciprocated her affection most heartily. That homely figure, clad in calico, wrapped in a shawl, and surmounted with a Shaker bonnet, is more to this army than the Madonna to a Catholic, said an officer, pointing to her as she emerged from the Sanitary Convention headquarters laden with supplies. Mary A. Beckerdike was born in Knox County, Ohio, July 19, 1817. She came of Revolutionary ancestors and was never happier than when recounting the stories told her when a child by the grandfather who served with Washington during the 7 Years' struggle. Her husband died 2 years before the breaking out of the war. She was a living Galesburg 111 and was a member of the Congregational Church when the war broke out. Hardly had the troops, hold on 1 minute. Okay. Hardly had the troops reached Cairo when, from the sudden change in their habits, sickness broke out, and the ladies sent down Mother Bickerdike. After the Battle of Belmont, she was appointed matron of the large post hospital in Cairo. The surgeon was given to drunkenness. He had filled all the positions in the hospital with surgeons and officers of his sort, and bacchanal carousels in the doctor's room were of frequent occurrence. Sisters of mercy in the hospital would have been quiet. Soldiers might suffer. Officers and surgeons might drink to drunkenness, especially if they were Roman Catholics, but they would be mute and unobserving. They are this way in the hospital in Washington, where drunken surgeons revel, priests christen their illegitimate children, while government supports the concern, and all goes merry as a marriage bell. Not so with Mother Bickerdike. In 24 hours, surgeons and matrons were at swords' points. She denounced him to his face, and when the garments and the delicacies sent her for the use of the sick and wounded disappeared mysteriously, she charged their theft upon him and his subordinates. He ordered her out of the hospital and threatened to put her out if she did not hasten her departure. She replied that she would stay as long as the men needed her, that if he put her out of one door, she would come in at another. When anybody left, it would be he and not she. She told him she had lodged complaints against him at headquarters, finding a ward master dressed in the shirt, slippers, and socks that had been sent her for the sick. She seized him by the collar in his own ward and disrobed him, sans ceremony, before the patients, leaving him nude, save his pantaloons. She uttered the parting injunction, "Now, you rascal, let's see what you'll steal next." To ascertain who were the thieves of the food she prepared, she put tartar emetic in the peaches left on the table to cool. Then she went to her own room to await results. She did not have to wait long. Soon the sounds from the terribly sick thieves reached her ears, when, like a nemesis, she stalked in among them. There they were, crooks, table waiters, stewards, ward masters, all save some of the surgeons, suffering terribly from the imminent, but more from the apprehension that they were poisoned. "Peaches don't seem to agree with you, eh?" she said, looking at the pale, wretched, groaning fellows with a sardonic smile. "Well, let me tell you that you will have a worse time than this if you keep on stealing. You may eat something seasoned with ratbane one of these nights." Colonel Grant was then in command. The thieves were returned to the regiments. Honest men were substituted in their places. The drunken surgeon was removed and one to an inner room. "But I guess he won't see you." "Guess he will." And she pushed into the apartment. "Good morning, General. I want to speak to you a moment. May I come in?" "I should think you had got in," answered the general, barely looking up in great annoyance. "What's up now?" "Why, General," said the earnest matron in a perfect torrent of words, "we can't stand that last order of yours, nohow. You'll have to change it, sure." "Well, I'm busy today and cannot attend to you. I will see you some other time." She saw the smile in the corner of his mouth and replied, "General, don't send me away until you fix this." He fixed it, and for weeks all the sanitary stores sent from Nashville to Chattanooga and the forts of that road were sent directly or indirectly through this meditation of Mother Bickerdike. This woman, distinguished for common sense, for devotion to the soldiers, is left without employment, and nuns that never saw a battlefield and sisters of charity that never had any sympathy with the soldiers are placed in charge of government hospitals, because Protestants are dumb when they ought to speak and blind when they ought to see. This wonderful woman was for years without recognition from the government, and is now in the pension office of San Francisco, where she belongs to the best hospital position in the gift of the government. And when Moses and Aaron appeared before Pharaoh and used their wonder-working rod, the magicians imitated them. So when the white wings of hospital tents were brightening the vision in various portions of the land, Rome saw her opportunity and began her work in Washington. The Providence General Hospital, corner of 2D and D Streets, is famed in Washington. It was erected in the midst of the war. Into this hospital, nuns have charge. The patients, be they Protestant or Roman Catholic, are expected to attend service in accordance with the forms of Rome. Proselytizing is a business and when this is impossible, the patient suffered. Captain Amos Cliff was in the pension bureau. He was sick. He carried to the hospital a watch and money, and after paying his board for a week, died. All his effects disappeared, as is the custom. The Grand Army Relief Committee, at the head of which is Captain Frank A. Buter, having learned of his death, went with Captain D. A. Dennison to inquire for him. No intelligence was furnished. He was a dead soldier. They knew where to look for his remains. His body was found in the medical college being cut up by the surgeons. The Grand Army boys took the mutilated remains of a brave soldier and, purchasing a coffin, sent what was left of an honored father to his friends. They who are so particular about giving a Roman Catholic burial surrendered the body of a Grand Army soldier to the surgeon, not caring what was done with it or where it went, to a pauper's grave or a surgeon's table. Imagine Mother Bickerdike in such a position, and how different would be the treatment received. It is fashionable to bow down to Rome. All seem aware that there are 7 millions of Roman Catholics in this country. The many forgot that they are 50 millions who are not Roman Catholics, who have some rights to this free land, which are all under obligation to respect. The Protestant element wait for a leadership. American citizens should be jealous of their rights. They should be not only self-respecting, but self-asserting. God has planted, preserved, and grown this nation not to bow down to the worst despotism the world ever saw, but to lift up the enslaved and cause them to read their possible destiny in the lines of the promise written by God's providence and the marvelous possibilities placed within their reach. The Republic of the United States is to be the educator of the world. American citizens must keep this thought in mind and so develop a higher type of humanity, better hospital service, and a broader Christianity, and a nobler living than has hitherto blessed the world. And that concludes chapter 7, brothers and sisters. I'm getting very tired now, so I'm going to have to stop for the evening. I love you all so very much. It does not, I don't think this worked. Hopefully it did. I'm not sure. God bless you all. I love you so very much. Keep your eyes on Jesus, your nose in the book, which is the Word of God, and embed the Word of God upon the tablets of your hearts, so you and I will not sin against God or be deceived. Good night.